What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Took a week off doing this series just because I don't want it to get stale. Obviously, that can happen when you do something every single week, and I wanted more time to pass so more things could happen for you guys to ask questions about. And there's definitely a lot of interesting storylines in the NHL right now that we will talk about in this video, but as always, I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. I know I say this every single time, but I really do mean it. I read all the comments, even the ones that don't get featured in the video, and I appreciate all of you guys. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The first question we have comes from GhostX2794, who says, is Miro Heiskanen a top 5 defenseman in the NHL? In my opinion, he definitely is. Bonus held his offensive game back big time the past couple of seasons, but under DeBoer, he's nearly a point per game while still being absolutely incredible defensively like he always has been, and also really appreciate the support. I really feel like Miro Heiskanen doesn't get enough attention, doesn't get talked about enough, even like on his own team. Obviously, when you talk about the Dallas Stars this year, so much attention is given to Jason Robertson and Ruby Hintz, and rightfully so. Those guys are amazing. I think the only two defensemen I would confidently take over Miro Heiskanen are Adam Fox and Cale Makar. Other than that, I feel like you could make a case for Heiskanen, so I would say, yeah, he probably is a top 5 defenseman in the league right now. And now that Heiskanen is putting up big offensive numbers to go along with his elite defensive play, I feel like he's probably going to start to get the love he deserves, the love that guys like Fox and like Makar get. The next question we have comes from Tom Blade, who says, assuming the Devils make the playoffs, should they be concerned about the fact that they don't really have a lot of physical players? They are a fast and skilled team, but come playoff time, the play style changes drastically and games become way more physical. And also really appreciate the support. You're not wrong in that assessment. They are a very fast, skilled team, and the game does change in the postseason, but I honestly think they'd be fine. They do have a couple guys that can muck it up, like Miles Wood is a guy that can definitely hold his own physically. Ryan Graves also isn't afraid to let his presence be known. Honestly, I just feel like more often than not, the better team is going to win in a playoff series. Just because the Devils are a really fast and skilled team, I don't get the impression that they have soft players. Like, I don't think Jack Hughes is going to have any problem in the playoffs. Same goes for Jesper Bratt. Those guys are game breakers. I think no matter the environment, no matter how physical the game is, they're going to be able to impose their will on the game offensively. So I really don't put too much stock in, teams not having a bunch of goons pretty much. I mean, Colorado just won the Stanley Cup. Obviously, they're an incredibly fast and skilled team, and the team they played in the Western Conference Finals, the Edmonton Oilers, same goes for them. Moving on now, the next question we have comes from Moodlamp4181, who says, will Binnington's actions get him benched or a talking to by his team? You have to imagine he has already got that talking to, considering the fact that Craig Berube, the head coach of the St. Louis Blues, literally called Jordan Binnington out after the game. I can't remember his exact quote, but it was something along the lines of like, the antics need to stop, just play goalie and stop the puck. So you'd have to imagine if he goes as far as calling Jordan Binnington out to the media, to the public, that he would also say something to him behind closed doors and in the locker room. And as far as Binnington goes, is anyone else just as sick of him as I am? Like, it seems like every other night, every time he plays goal, we see some video posted on Twitter, posted on social media of him doing something that just makes himself look stupid. And it's going to be frustrating for the players he's playing against, right? Because it's not like, if a goalie's doing these kinds of things, you can just go run the goalie or try to fight the goalie like you could if a skater on the opposing team was doing these kinds of things. The next question we have comes from Yasharia. Hopefully I said that properly, but the question is, who will be the Oilers starter come playoff time? Campbell has been getting better, but still not the soup we all know, and Skinner's kind of coming down to earth. I don't think there's any way we can tell right now. I really just feel like it comes down to who has the hotter hand come playoff time, and I think that's the case for most teams, unless you have a guy like Andrei Vasilevsky or Connor Hellebuck, who maybe they have a couple cold games leading up to the playoffs. You're still going to start those guys in game one, but when it comes to the Oilers, especially with how inconsistent, their goaltending has been, especially from Jack Campbell, I feel like you honestly just have to go with who's playing better at that time, and I think that's probably what they'll end up doing. The next question we have comes from Tyler Aaron65, who says, with the Canucks letting Brock Boeser seek a trade, what team do you think he will be traded to? So this is definitely a pretty interesting development. Obviously, Brock Boeser hasn't been performing the greatest this season. He was going to be a healthy scratch before their last game. He ultimately ended up playing and actually scoring a goal in that game, but yeah, it was reported that the Canucks are letting Brock Boeser's agent, put feelers out there in terms of a trade. It definitely does seem like this is a player that could really benefit from a change of scenery. As far as what teams I think he could potentially be traded to, I feel like the Anaheim Ducks wouldn't be a bad fit. Obviously, the Canucks and Ducks are in the same division, and sometimes GMs don't like making trades, especially big trades, in their own division, but I think the Ducks would be actually a good fit for Brock Boeser, and if he can get back to, the 30 goal scorer that we know is capable of winning, the Ducks could definitely use that offense. The New York Islanders, also a team out there. It seems like every time there's a winger available, like a bigger name winger, they're always kind of poking around. They always have their name in the hat. So maybe the New York Islanders. Without diving getting too deep into this, let me know if you guys want to see maybe a video of like 5 realistic Brock Boeser trades that could happen or something along the lines of that, because that's something I definitely want to do and could do over the next couple of days. Next up, this question comes from Braden Moda 3549, who says, with the Sabres' recent struggle but being a top team in goals for per game, do you think they need to make a change in net or on defense? It's getting pretty ridiculous the amount of leads we blow. Honestly, if you're a Sabres fan, I feel like this season you kind of just have to look at everything, you know, from the bright side, just focus on the positives. And obviously the positives are they are a really high-flying offensive team. They don't really struggle to put the puck in the net. Sure, defensively aren't the greatest, and, you know, goaltending, there's a lot left there to be desired as well. But I don't think the Buffalo Sabres came into this season, you know, wanting to be a playoff team or expecting to be a playoff team, or they wouldn't have came in with a tandem of Comrie and Craig Anderson. No offense to those guys whatsoever, but, you know, Craig Anderson is, what, the oldest player in the NHL at this point. Eric Comrie, yeah, he had good numbers last season with the Winnipeg Jets, but all in all, this is a guy who never really had that big of a role and has been pretty inconsistent throughout his NHL career, you know, up and down between the AHL and the NHL. So say if the Sabres went out last offseason and, you know, acquired a bunch of defensemen and spent big money or made a big trade for a goaltender and this was still happening, then it would be concerning, but I just wouldn't worry about that right now because I think this is a team that's headed in the right direction, and I do think getting a good goaltender will be a priority of the Sabres in the offseason, whether that's, you know, maybe giving a chance to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen or going out and trying to sign like a free agent or trading for a guy. Moving on now, this question comes from Adam Warren, who says, with Jason Robertson playing out of his mind, do you think there's a legit conversation to be had for him being a top 10 player? Also, does this add any value to his younger brother? Do you think teams consider good genes? And also really appreciate the kind words. Answering the second part of your question first, I don't really think it does anything at all to Nick Robertson or adds any value to him. Even if Nick Robertson wasn't Jason Robertson's brother, I think he'd still be, you know, a highly regarded prospect. This is a guy who absolutely lit it up in junior. I still definitely think Nick Robertson has a bright future. And as far as Jason Robertson being a top 10 player in the league, I mean, this season, obviously, he's a top 10 player in the league without a doubt. Even if you just don't look at his counting stats, which are unbelievable, you know, up there on par with Connor McDavid. But if you look at his underlying numbers too, like, this guy's almost a perfect hockey player. He has great defensive numbers as well. He plays a complete 200-foot game. He is a legit superstar, and I really don't think there's any question about it. Next up, this question comes from Astro Wraith 7794, who says, Sean Monahan seems to be on a career resurrection mission in Montreal after years plagued with injuries. He's currently 28 in UFA at the end of the season. So far, he has 16 points in 24 games, 54-point pace. Do you think he keeps up this pace or even potentially breaks the 60-point mark for the first time since 2019? If so, where do you think he'll end up next season and on what sort of deal? Also, really appreciate the support. Yeah, Sean Monahan is quietly kind of reviving his career a little bit in Montreal. Would not be surprised whatsoever if he breaks the 50-point mark this season, if he can stay healthy, and not even looking ahead to next season yet, like where he's going to sign as a free agent or if he signs an extension in Montreal. But I think this is a very interesting name to look at around the trade deadline. The Colorado Avalanche are a team that I think always needs to be brought up when you're talking about a middle six center, but it is pretty crazy to think that Montreal got a first-round pick to take on Sean Monahan's contract this season, and now with him playing well, being in the final year of his deal in Montreal, you know, obviously they could retain salary in a trade, they might actually get a pretty decent asset for him. From Noah Miller 4957, what do you think of the Jets? Do you think they can sustain what they are doing now and finish the season near the top of the Central, or will they fall off by the end of the year? The Jets have definitely been a pretty surprising team so far this season. Not that everyone thought they were going to suck, it's just I feel like most people thought they'd be like a fringe playoff team, a team that's competing for a wildcard spot, not necessarily one of the better teams in the Western Conference, which they have been so far. And with Connor Hellebuyck playing as good as he is right now, I definitely think this is sustainable. Of course, the Jets aren't a great defensive team, but when you have elite level finishers up front like a Kyle Connor, like a Mark Scheifele, you know, Pierre-Luc Dubois having a good season, and also Nikolai Ehlers is out. They're doing this without Ehlers, which I feel like makes it that much more impressive. When you have guys that can produce offense and finish like them, and then Hellebuyck being just a world beater in net, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Moving on now, this next question comes from Awesome Zach, who says, how is Tage Thompson so good? It seems like every goal he scores is a highlight reel goal. It's almost like he's a replacement of Eichel. I feel like Tage Thompson is just a living, breathing example of you got to be patient with players sometimes. I mean, it's crazy to think that this is a guy who came to Buffalo in the Ryan O'Reilly trade, a trade that for the first couple of years, especially after O'Reilly won the Selke and then won the Cup with the St. Louis Blues, it was seen as just an absolute fleecing by the St. Louis Blues, completely lopsided. And now you look at that trade, and I think Buffalo made out pretty well, getting a top line player like Tage Thompson, who's probably going to score 40 plus goals this year easily. He's proving that last season wasn't a fluke, and I said this in one of my recent One From Every Team videos, but I really do feel like Tage Thompson is one of the most unique offensive players we have ever seen in the league. The dude is like 6'8" on skates, and the things he's able to do at that size, he just shouldn't be able to do. Like his hands are insane. Obviously, like you said, it seems like every goal he scores is a highlight reel. And then next thing you know, if he's not dangling someone and finishing with like a soft touch, he can absolutely rip a one-timer on the power play. And he's fast. Like, that's the thing with a lot of these guys at this size. Like, they aren't amazing skaters, but Tage Thompson is. He's great at using his body. One of the most fun players to watch in the league, in my opinion. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Hugh Barkers, who says, is Josh Morrissey a dark horse candidate for the Norris? Josh Morrissey wouldn't be such a bad new nickname to have. He's definitely having an unbelievable season, up to 26 points already in just 23 games for a guy whose previous career high was 37. Like, he's only 11 points away from breaking that already. And I think his play has been huge for the Winnipeg Jets. Like, this is a guy who makes $6.25 million a season. That contract definitely didn't look the greatest the first few years, and now here he is playing like a legit top pairing D-man. So it's definitely been a nice surprise for the Winnipeg Jets. I don't really think anybody thought Josh Morrissey had this in him. Next up, this question comes from Mobama6589, who says, who's more likely to be traded, Erik Karlsson or Timo Meier, and what would a return look like? I would definitely say Timo Meier is more likely to be traded, just because I think he's an easier player to trade, because his contract, isn't $11.5 million until 2027 or whatever Karlsson's is. Now, Timo Meier himself has kind of an interesting thing coming up where his qualifying offer at the end of the season is $10 million, I believe, but still, I don't think he's anywhere near as hard to trade, or would be as hard to trade as Erik Karlsson. So just for those reasons, I would say Timo Meier for sure. And now for the final question of today's video, this one comes from Pasta. I'm not even gonna try to say it. We'll just call it Pasta. Thoughts on Hronek's early season success so far? He has been amazing. Yeah, as a Red Wings fan, I still can't even believe that I'm watching the same Filip Hronek this season that I watched the past couple of seasons. Like, he literally looks like a completely different player. I think this season he's playing with his most reliable defense partner he's probably ever had in his career in Olli Maatta, which, I mean, sounds kind of crazy, but Olli Maatta really has been good this year. So I think Olli Maatta deserves some credit, being able to unlock some new things in Hronek's game. But I do feel like we have to give Hronek a lot of credit. Like, he's just playing with so much confidence right now. His patience, especially in the offensive zone, where in years past, we just get the puck and fling it at shin pads or dump it in the corner. Now he's holding on to it, head up, trying to make a play, and it's leading to some great results. Like, I think he's third on the Red Wings in scoring so far, only behind Larkin and Kubalik, and it's pretty crazy to think, but he has been Detroit's best defenseman so far this season. I don't think anybody would have expected that coming into the year, considering Moritz Seider's on this team. But man, if Hronek can keep up playing like this, if this is who Filip Hronek is right now, Detroit's right side is set with him and Seider in the top four. So that is going to wrap up this week's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Like I said at the beginning, huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. I appreciate all of you so much. If you guys enjoyed this and you want to see another episode next week, be sure to drop a like on the video. That is the best way to show your support. And last but not least, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all season long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.